Hey, it's the Dino and Joe Show. My name is Dino. The man over there, his name is Joe.
Greetings, salutations, all the above.
Yoink, send away. I don't know. So you're doing well?
I am doing very well. It's starting to become a little more frigid in Chicago. We're in the 40s now,
Oof.
so
Yeah. Yeah, brutal.
it's
Brutal. I pushed it to the very last day to wrap my beehives
oh, there you
so that
go.
they were insulated for the winter. And
Sure.
the next day it was like 30. I'm like,
hmm
oof.
Well,
I pushed it.
my father-in-law has plants that he puts out front and out back every year,
Yep.
and obviously like he doesn't just want to kill them and plant new ones and wait for them to
Right.
grow. He saves a
Right.
lot of them. So it's called Plant Day in our
Ah,
household, where we take everything outside, we put it downstairs. He's got like a nice little greenhouse situation down there with some lighting and stuff, and
yeah.
it's a nice little setup.
You
So
know,
it's like a rainforest.
one of the not so great jobs that I've had in my life, I worked in a greenhouse in Wisconsin when I worked in radio in Green Bay.
Mhm.
That tells you how good the radio job was. I had to actually get another job
You
just to
get
be able to
another
make
job.
ends meet. And
Uh,
I would work overnight. So I would work all
uh-huh.
night and then I would work in the morning at this green. I wouldn't even see bed until like noon. And it was not a good job. I mean, not that it was a bad place to work or a bad
Sure,
job. It just wasn't fun.
I get it.
Uh and I'll never forget. I just stopped going because I was
You just
like,
stop. You're
no,
like, I'm
it
done.
was killing
I'm
me.
out.
It was just killing me, right? Like I wasn't getting any sleep and I just couldn't do it anymore. And
Yeah.
like I missed like 3 days in a row and they called me and said, "Hey, we're not gonna need you anymore." I was
Oh,
like,
okay.
okay, well, I'm
Thanks.
good with that.
Appreciate you.
Yeah. So, but the reason why I bring it up is because I
Mhm,
know that recently I took a new role with the
mhm,
company that I work for,
mhm.
and you, sir, are in that process. I know.
I
I
am.
thought it would be interesting to talk about like a little bit about that experience because
Yeah.
my wife, is in that similar situation where she has to start looking
Mhm.
and writing a resume today, I will tell you, I learned is way different than it used to be.
It's different. It's very
They look
different.
different.
Yeah.
People put style in. When I I started resumes, it was just a list. It was a
Yeah.
white sheet of paper with a list. And like what set you off is if you went and got like more expensive paper that was higher
Oh, yeah.
quality
The
and printed your
heavy, like the
resume on
thicker.
that.
Yes.
Yeah, and it had maybe a
That
little
set
bit
you
of a
apart.
tone to it.
hmm
That was what stood you out. People were like, "Whoa, look at this fancy resume.
Yep.
Ooh, they must be very intelligent, right?" And now I looked at resumes and I was like, "That doesn't even look like a resume anymore, and that looks like a article that would be in People magazine."
Right. Well, so I remember I went to high school from 2002 to 2004. And our junior and senior year, in was it English class? It was, I don't remember which class, but
Yeah.
we learned how to write a resume.
Oh, sure. I
And
did. I went to school in 1984 to 1988,
yeah,
and
so
I can tell you that you learn how to
it's
write a resume, but you learned a different resume than I learned.
oh, absolutely. And here's the thing, like in 2000 to 2004, computers were definitely different than they were today, just like they were
Sure.
very different from when you went to high school, right?
Absolutely.
And it was strange because I went up to my dad. I'll never forget this. I'm like, Dad, they're talking to me about how to write a resume. Can I see what your resume looks like? And I look at it, and there's nothing wrong with his resume because it's short, simple, and to the point, right? Name, address, phone number, just a basic quick line of,
Yeah.
hey, here's why you should hire me.
Right.
Then his professional experiences. He did, I think, 7 to 10 years. His education,
Yep.
and then he always attached references. That was the big thing, right? References. So
Absolutely.
you had to have people to call, and I always
And you
thought that
had
was funny.
you
Oh,
had
go
to
ahead.
have you had to
Three,
have three
three. What? Yeah,
references.
right.
One of them had to be a personal reference,
Yes,
and the other
right.
two were a business
Business. I
reference.
remember. Yes. Well, here's the thing. I never got about that. If I'm being perfectly honest, I think it should have been people who hated you, because that if you
Well, it's
come,
easier. It's an
it's
easier
right,
list to come up with.
right. Well, it's like people who like you, of course, they're going to say good things about
Well,
you.
right,
You want
exactly.
that person who's like, that SOB, he
Right.
one time did this. And you're like, oh, well, this
He
is
didn't
much
show up
more.
for 3 days
Yeah,
and we fired
right,
him. Like that's
right. That's good to know. But yes, it had to be two personal, or excuse me, two business, one personal.
yeah.
Uh, and I remember I spent hours and hours and hours just trying to like manipulate, but it's literally just like name stuff. Like it was very
Yep.
simple,
Yep.
and there was not a lot to it.
Nope.
What was your first resume like? Like what did it look like?
Um, so it's interesting today, right? Like when I wrote a resume the first time, there was no web, there was no computer,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So it was literally your name, your address, and your phone number. And there was no cell phone, right? That was a
Hmm.
landline to your house that anybody could answer. So that was
Hmm.
always, interesting.
Fun.
And then you listed out the jobs that you had done. You listed out where you went to school, and then you listed out like any your references for sure. Like I remember the first time I saw references available on request, and it was like shocking because it was like, well, if you had references, why wouldn't you just put them down?
Right.
Right? It always like, oh, you don't have references. Like that's your way of saying I couldn't come up with it. People looked
Yep.
into resumes completely differently. But it was
Absolutely.
very basic, and it was just, and this whole thing about the last 7 years or 5 years, that's the thing I hear now, right? Oh, just put your last 7 years of work, or where you've worked for the last five. Like you put everything down. Like it was like,
Hmm.
now it's like, oh, they want your resume to be one page and
Hmm.
easy to digest. And like that, they it used to more focus on setting the track record that you had worked and you had stayed at businesses a
Right.
long time. You
Correct.
had built that, career, and you
Right.
were loyal, and you would only be leaving under the circumstances of, something extreme. Like it was not looked at like, because people took jobs and thought they were jobs for life.
Right.
That was still when I was a kid, that still went on. Like you thought like the job that you got was your career for life. Like it wasn't
Right.
like, oh, I'm going to leave and go someplace else. And I'm going to leave and
Right.
go do something else to get all this experience to go do what I want to do. That didn't happen. It's a different world today. When you hear about people leaving their job after 2 years to take another job, and then 2 years later take
Not
another
even
job,
sometimes.
like that never was a case that, when I was young, that was never the case. That's definitely a modern transition into work and what a resume is really about now.
It was funny because when I started doing that, I didn't really start working until I was about 16 or 17, right?
Yeah.
Like I didn't do much. And then when I started, it was officiating. I
Yeah.
refereed. I refereed youth games for hockey,
Sure.
lacrosse, whatever it was.
Sure.
And then I picked up, retail jobs, played against sports. I've talked about these Brookstone, things like that.
Hmm.
And, it's difficult when you're trying to find a job when all you have are two things that's all you've ever done, right? Like
Yeah.
that's it. And it's like, here are the things I've done. I think they kind of apply to you. Like, you don't know. It's weird. And uh, I found myself like trying to, and I still know people who do this. They take a simple phrase and
Yeah.
extrapolate it into a paragraph, right? So instead of saying, I got my driver's license, I am very pleased to announce that I have received the ability to properly, operate a motor vehicle upon highways and
Yeah.
freeways throughout the United States of America on
Right.
a, personal, it's like this long soliloquy on a simple statement. And some people do that. And some people did that when I was younger, and some people I know still do that, but it's just always so interesting.
Yeah. It describing your job became different, right?
Hmm.
And maybe it also might be industry I was in, right? Radio is a,
Sure.
it didn't really have a lot to do with your resume as far as like all these experiences you had, as it did how you sounded being on the radio, because you always sent a
Right.
tape, right? So you always
Right.
had this greatest hits tape of all your greatest bits and stuff on
Mhm.
the air so they could hear what you sounded like. And then on top of that, it was about, you working at radio stations, not really the, all the experience you gathered. Well, because the radio job became the same. If you were on air, like you just
Right.
took that same shtick and put it in another city. And we
Right.
used
You
to
just
talk
change the
about how,
letters. Yeah.
right, we would talk about how guys would like, after a couple of years, had to change cities because they ran out of bits. Like, it's all they knew how to do, and it just became the same thing. And so they'd move, new, new audience, same material. That was kind of the whole joke.
That's
And
funny.
running radio stations that kind of cared about what radio stations you ran, but still, it was about how your station sounded. So a little bit different than now today. You have to put, these what KPIs you managed, and what your rhythm of business, or what they call ROB is, and how do you did you manage people, and what have you done to get them promoted, and have they excelled under you? Like there's a lot more that goes into a resume description of the job that you did
Hmm.
than I remember that being. It was pretty easy to just go, hey, this is what I did, this is what I ran, this is. Now it's much more involved. And I think
Well,
LinkedIn has changed that completely too.
oh, I was just going to bring that up because I was going to say before I was going to talk about that. I remember when I had the 3 references. I remember
Yeah.
when I changed it to references available upon request.
Yeah.
And now it's not even consideration. I don't think about it. Like it's not, it's never, I would say in the last 7 years, maybe 10, I've never thought about references. I've never thought about somebody I've had to
No.
say, hey, it's just not an important thing. But then that's where you pivot to the LinkedIn idea, right? That's where you can get a lot of
Yeah.
references, right? Because
Yeah.
people can say, hey, I worked with this person at this place for this time. Here's what I thought they did really well. I either worked with them, under them, for them, around them, whatever. And it really helps. And it was funny, one of my old managers always thought, when I was asking for feedback or people were giving me feedback on there, they thought I was ready to move on to a new job. They're like, people only ask for feedback when they're looking for a new job. And I'm like, or I just want their feedback. Like, that's it. Like, I'm
I'm
not
just trying
looking
to make
for a new
myself
job for
better.
them.
That's
I'm
all.
just trying to make myself better. Like, that's literally it. So it's like,
Wow.
I don't know. But LinkedIn definitely changed it because I found out about this only a couple of years ago, but I think it's really cool. If you were at a like an event, for instance, you're at a general meeting with a bunch of people, you can
Sure.
actually turn on your phone the ability to actually meet people, like
Yep.
connections that you have
Yep.
that might be
Yep.
there, or people near you who are interested in meeting others. And it just bing, Mike Jacobs is 50 feet in front of you. Oh, hey, Mike, what's going? And then you talk, you have that conversation. Same thing when I meet somebody for the first time, whether it's an interviewer, somebody I am interviewing, somebody that I met professionally just by happenstance. I always add them to LinkedIn because growing that network, I think, is always beneficial. You never know
Sure.
where that can turn you.
Yeah, and I think that's become bigger too. Networking is bigger now and talked about more now than
Absolutely.
I ever remember, right? Radio was networked, but it was more networked about guys that were disc jockeys knowing other guys that were disc jockeys and trading material or listening to each other's shows or,
Mhm.
doing bits for each other, that kind of thing. That was kind of the networking. And then there was like one national convention a year that maybe you would see these people at, but it was never like this, like, what it is today. Now it's about, are you networked with all these people to get all these experiences or to see what experiences you need to gather to be at their level? Like networking today is much different. Now, I will tell you, it also helps you much more today, I believe. In the modern
Absolutely.
workplace environment, it's about your reputation as much as it is your resume.
Yep.
And I think that your reputation can get you in the door to people to see your resume.
Absolutely.
But networking by far is one of the biggest. If you can't network,
You're
modern
done.
workplace is tough. Yes,
Yeah.
it's much
I
harder.
I've had so many people ask me, "What's your brand?" Have you heard that?
Oh
What's your
yeah,
brand? What is Joe Prez's brand?
what
And
do you
that's one of
stand
those
for?
things where, yeah, what do you stand like that basically is saying like what does everybody know about you, right? Like
Yep,
what are you the go-to person for? And
yep.
and it's funny because if there's one thing I hate about corporate culture, it is the buzzwords or, let me piggyback off that idea or like, I those are just this is a side note. I absolutely hate that kind of stuff. Like let's circle back to that. It's like, oh my goodness, can
I'd
we
like to
just
dovetail on what you just said
oh
right
my
there.
goodness, that just drives me so insane. Anyways, that's
I,
a whole different that's a whole
so,
separate podcast on its own.
but I have to share this story because
Okay.
um, we were when I first got hired at Best Buy. We did our training in Detroit. And so a bunch of us I had to all go up to do this onboarding, like 3 or 4 days, whatever it was in Detroit. And there was several of us that went to dinner together.
Hmm.
And we had decided that we were going to all use HR statements in this presentation that we had to give. And so we all had
Okay.
key things we had to say,
Hmm.
right? And so somebody had said, like their thing was that they were going to circle back to something, and then it would have nothing to do with what we were talking about. And
Hmm.
then mine was that I was going to dovetail onto that, and it was all these like HR speeches, right? And so it got to me, and I'm like, I'd like to dovetail on what he just said, and then I totally changed the subject. That was the whole thing. Like every time we did it, and we all were positioned throughout the room to do it.
Right.
And it got to me, and I was like, I was gonna die, right? Because I'm just like
That's
ready to like.
hilarious.
And so I literally said, I'd like to dovetail on what that person said. I don't even remember what I said after that. I totally changed the subject, and then I just put my head down because I knew if I looked up and I could
Yeah.
hear the people snickering behind me, if
Right.
I
You're
looked
like, I
up, it
can't see
was
it.
over.
It's
I
done.
mean, and
It's done.
I was beat red in the face, right? And I'm just like, oh my goodness.
That's
And
hilarious.
we all went through it. Everybody did it. Like it was
Everybody had to do
amazing.
it. Yeah.
Everybody lived
It's
up to
great.
it, and we all got
Nobody
away with it.
laughed.
Oh
That's
no.
fantastic. That's
No, but at
fantastic.
the end, like after
Yeah.
that session ended, we all get outside. Oh yeah, it was like relief to just be
It's
able to let it
right.
out. Because I mean, you could hear it, and then the minute the first guy started it, we were all like, "Oh, it's on."
Oh, yeah.
And then it's
Here we
like now
go.
I have to do mine, right? And so I was like
Challenge.
the second or third one, and I'll tell you, I never in my life held in pure joy of laughter.
For
And
so
then
long.
I got in trouble for something else at that thing anyway, so it didn't
Oh,
matter.
that's fine. I mean, exactly.
Yeah, they still let me
Those
work.
HR statements.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So I don't know about you, but right now I have two resumes that I use.
Okay.
One is what I guess you would call the modern resume, right? So it is not just the title description thing. Like it is colorful. It's interactive. It has graphs.
You have
It
the
has
characteristic wheel that tells all
yeah, like
about you.
well, yeah, it basically
My
says
favorite.
I spent this much time, resting, getting ready for the next thing. I spend this much time figuring out the business. I figured out this much time how to improve the business, this much
Yeah.
time for self-development, this much time, like all that kind of stuff, right? And
Right,
it's one of those
right.
things where I found it on LinkedIn, and it was from a connection of mine who said he got several successful jobs into, NYU Stern School of Business. And I'm like, well, if it works for him, let me try it out. And obviously, you want to make it your own, and that's what I did.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think it's a really good resume. Now, I know there are companies, people out there who hate that kind of stuff. They're like, too modern. I hate the modern stuff. It's not good. So I still have my old fashioned, like
Yeah.
literally from high
Just
school,
list
just
it out, man. Just
modern up. It's just boom, 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 done, and then that's it. That's for those companies where if I wanted to go there and I'm like, all right, also that's kind of the one I do for a company where I'm like, maybe I don't want to work here. This doesn't seem
yeah.
like my kind of
Yeah.
environment. So like, let's just throw that out there, see what happens. But yeah, I have to. What is yours? What's the big difference from your first resume that you made to the one today, other than the stuff we talked about?
So I was in a situation where I got reorged out of a business.
Mhm.
And one of the things that they gave us when they reorged us out was a actual professional resume writer.
Oh, that's
And so that person actually
considerate.
went through my resume and actually like, changed. I think the big thing is that there's keywords on there
Hmm.
about things that are talents for you that people want to see, right? They want to see things like change management. They want to see
Hmm.
that you're a people leader. They want to, they want to see the things that you have, what we like to call now in the corporate world, we like to call those your superhero powers.
Right.
Like, what's your superhero power, right? I get asked that all the time. And so I was going to like storytelling and,
Hmm.
talk about my background because it leads naturally into conversation. One of
Yeah.
the best things that I have is that I worked in radio. People are instantly interested. They
Super
want to
cool.
know,
Yep.
they want to ask questions, right? And so like that kind of helps me in that conversation. But there's key elements that are on there that I would never have had on there. My resume is much more succinct than it ever was.
Hmm.
You got to be, you have to be, if you run a major business that it does major money, you have to be willing to
Right.
put that on your resume that you've run a major
Absolutely.
business. And when I was a general manager, I was running a store that made more money than some Fortune 500 companies. There were
Right.
CEOs that made less money than my store did, right? So
Hmm.
like that's big. Like they want to see that if you're going in that certain type of business, they want to see you can handle volume, and how do you
Right.
manage that entire process, right? So there's pieces like that I would never have had, but um, and it's interesting too because my resume has both radio and retail on it and
Hmm.
business. So that's a little bit of a challenge sometimes for people to understand, like from one to the other, and how do you get there,
Right.
and
Right.
how can you be successful in both, and like so that's an interesting twist that's on there as well.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So we are going to come back, and when we come back, I thought
Yes.
it'd be kind of fun to talk about some of the other side of resumes in interviewing and maybe some of the horror stories because you and I have both done interviews. You and
Yes.
I have both had challenges in those interviews, and then
Absolutely.
there's some things that are just definite pitfalls and don't do's, and
Yes.
maybe we could share that. That'd be kind of cool.
That'd be great.
All right, Dino and Joe Show. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back to the Dino and Joe Show, the show that might help you get a job or may not.
Don't mention us. If you mention
Oh yeah,
Dino or
no,
Joe,
that won't help.
you're out. You're
People are like,
out.
what? do. Unless
Ouch.
you're one of the 31 people that actually listen to us, they don't really care.
So they don't care at
They're
all.
like, who are those guys? Like,
Could be a Fortune 500 CEO. You don't know.
could
Maybe somebody from like I don't know, Oscar Mayer. I don't know if they're Fortune 500, but that's the first. I don't know why that's the first company that
Oscar
jumped into my
Mayer.
mind.
Wienermobile. You know what?
Yeah,
If somebody from Oscar Mayer is listening,
yeah.
I very much want to ride in the Wienermobile.
Like
Ever
we
since
should
I
do an
was a kid.
episode. We should do an episode in there.
Oh, I would broadcast live from the
I would
Wienermobile.
100%. Are you
Absolutely.
kidding me? We would
Yes.
absolutely live that up.
Yeah. If that could happen one day, that'd be a dream come true.
Thank you, Oscar.
Check that off the non-existing bucket list that I have.
Yep.
So we're talking about resumes, we're talking about interviews and getting new jobs and those kinds of things. And I thought it would be kind of fun to share maybe some of the other side, because you and I have both done interviews, and some of them go really well and some of them don't. And
Most don't for me.
and then there's a couple other things, but I'll share this story just to start, because I always found this fascinating. This is an old story that I gathered from Virgin, and Richard Branson, who's the head of Virgin, talks about how the way that they do interviews is you are interviewed by everyone who you affect. So if you lead a team of 10 people, all 10 people sit on the interview, because if they're going to choose you as their leader, they want everybody to say yes, right?
I like
If
that.
you're gonna run the company, they put the whole entire company in front of you. Like they shut down everything and say, we're doing interviews, right? And then he talks about how when he's in an interview with his whoever's in the interview, before the candidate comes in, he says, hey, if I say anything about how is the Mexican food, that is my key that I am not interested in this person and I don't want to talk to them anymore, and the interview's over. So everyone knows that if he gives that verbal clue, they all stop and the interview's done.
Yeah.
Like that literally happens. But hey, he doesn't want to waste his time, because his thing is, if I walk in and I say, hey, how are you doing?
Right.
What's going on? Right? How are you today? He's like, I really want to care. I really want to know, because I care.
Absolutely.
And if I have to have somebody who I don't care, then I don't want to know. So
yeah.
There you go. If you're interviewing at Virgin, and you there's a tip for you.
So I'm gonna pivot, if I may, to a story.
Sure. You just used HR speak, but okay, go ahead and pivot.
Well, I mean, I figured we might as well. Let's see how many we can sneak into this. So pivoting to a story. So the whole concept of Sir Richard Branson, I believe it is.
Just saying. Yes.
OBE
over there. He's not
over there.
Here. We don't
not over here. We don't recognize that.
Whatever.
Anyways, so if he, I think it's a piece that he doesn't want to waste his own time, right? He's a very busy man. He doesn't want to waste the interviewee's time. They have, they obviously they're not going to get the job there. Let them get a job somewhere where they can. It's respect for everybody. 7 years ago, 6 years ago, 5 years ago, some period of time ago, I was interviewing for a company for legality's sake. We'll call it Schmoogle. Okay, Schmoogle. We'll call it Schmoogle.
I'm the Schmoog.
I'm the Schmoog. You go online, you Schmoogle something.
Yes, I've Schmoogled a few times, actually.
So I was applying to be a business program manager there.
A Schmoogle business program manager.
Schmoogle business, yeah. That's it's what everybody wants to work at. Schmoogle. So
man, Schmoogle sounds like a great place.
This was,
is it owned by Schmalphabet?
Schmalphabet. It is. It is. It is. You got it. They make
highly
the
veiled who we're talking about.
The new Schmixel 6 phone.
Yeah.
Anyways, this was back when I was a single man. I could move anywhere. I was going to move to Mountain View, California for this job, because that's where their headquarters is, Schmoogle. And so I am a person, when I do an interview, I don't care if it's phone interview, video interview, or in person, I dress up. I do.
Sure. Absolutely.
Sometimes it's tie, sometimes it's not. Depends on the company's feel. This one, now again, this was a phone interview. This person could not see me, but for myself, for up here, I had to dress like I would in the interview, so I would take it seriously.
Okay.
Right?
Sure.
It's just a mental thing for me.
Yeah.
So I sit there, I have my notes, I have my phone on speaker, and it begins. Now, allow me to preface this with, I'm going to change it. I was probably the worst interviewer or interviewee person to be interviewed ever in the history of time. I mean, ever. Okay. I'm not a good interview. Every time somebody asks me a question, my entire career and life exits my head. I don't know. Nothing is in it. So this very nice woman from Schmoogle is asking me typical questions. Nothing hard.
Okay.
Tell me about a time that right? How would
Yes.
you handle this situation?
Right.
Give an example of this. And I'm just struggling. I've practiced it. I've written it down for the goodness sakes. Like it's literally right there. Well, about 10 minutes in, she says to me, how about you just take a breather for a second? Let's breathe, maybe get a drink of water, and we'll come back. And it's at that point when I realized, okay, Joe, and this is my internal monologue, you had zero shot at this. You have
Right.
literally shown you're so worked up. This woman is very sweet and very nice to say this, but she's
Right.
clearly trying to calm you down, and you're not going to get this job. Let's be real. Like, it's just not going to happen. So I said, thank you very much. In fact, I'm going to take this time, and I respect your time, and I respect my time. I'm going to end this interview now because I just don't think this is going to work. Thank you very much for your time. Have a great day. And I hung up. I hung up on the interview 10 minutes in because it was similar to Sir Richard Branson. I
Yeah.
had no reason. There was no reason they were going to hire me. And
Right.
I was trying to be respectful of their time and understanding of mine. And frankly, I just didn't want to make any more of an ASS out of myself
Right. Right.
than I already had. I was like, so I was dejected for weeks after that. I was like, oh my God, you, you are so late. So I always beat myself up over that. But that is probably one of my worst
Right.
interviews of all time.
I once walked out of an interview. This is the only time I've ever actually done this, but I was working for a business and I wasn't happy and I wanted to make a change and I was like, I gotta go do something else.
Mhm.
And I got this interview for this financial place.
Mhm.
And I went to go do the interview and they're like, oh, Nancy so and so will be out here in just a few minutes. And I was like, and it just hit me and I was like, you gotta be kidding me. It was the mother of one of my employees.
Oh yeah,
And I was like, if they find out that I'm done this interview,
screwed.
like I'm dead.
You're done. Yeah.
And I was like, and I literally just got up and I just said, I'm sorry. I just don't think this is gonna work for me. And I
Yeah. No
walked out,
explanation.
walked
I'm
out.
out. See ya.
Nope,
No, that's
nope.
understandable. That makes perfect sense.
And I was like,
Uh,
you of all the small
of
world
all,
things to happen, like
that's what
that
was
one
going to
just
happen.
happened. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And she's like, really? Like you're leaving? I was like,
Yeah, I'm so
see
sorry.
you later. Sorry, gotta
I,
go.
I but I think because what would happen with me is with interviews, right? I always get so nervous.
Yep.
That's the big thing. And just recently, like, so I interviewed for a job. I didn't get it, but I left both interviews saying, Joe, you did the absolute best you could.
Yep.
You prepared out the wazoo. You talked with everybody that you could conceivably talk to about this role, about what this role would want. And I even reached out to some of the people that I would be working with and for
Sure.
to understand what they wanted from the role. Like I did everything I could. I didn't get the role mainly because of location and experience. I can live with that. I can't necessarily change those two things right now. So that's
Sure.
fine.
Sure.
But what I changed was I thought about it instead of answering these awkward questions, I was selling myself,
Yeah.
right? Like I think, how do I pitch myself to this? Because I'm very good with
Absolutely.
sales. How do I pitch myself? That was the big change that I made that helped me be more confident. And I just recently had a round of interviews on Friday that the same thing. I left feeling like I left everything on the table. Couldn't have done any better. We'll see what
Yeah.
happens, but it's one of those things where just practice preparation and changing your mindset can make a big difference.
But you're fooling yourself if you think that nobody gets nervous before an interview.
Oh,
You're
of
the only
course.
one, right? Because everybody does. Everybody who has to present themselves
Yeah.
always gets nervous about it. It just
Yes.
happens. It's part of it. Like, for whatever reason, it seems like I can turn it off at that moment, right? Then
Hmm.
I realize I just have to say something, and so
Hmm.
it just all comes out, right? Whereas other people, like it takes them, whatever they have to do. Some people have routines, some people have deep breathing exercises, whatever that is. But here's the thing to realize too is sometimes the people interviewing you are nervous,
Oh, absolutely. First
especially
time
if
I ever
they've
did
not
an
done a
interview.
lot of interviews
If
or
I did some with a previous role in my current company, and I got super nervous. Like I was like, okay, Joe, don't screw this up. Don't have HR called on you because you asked them something silly or stupid or make an
right.
inappropriate joke. Just like stick to the sheet. You have a sheet, stick to it for the love of
They give
God.
you that for a reason. And that's
Yeah,
that's the
exactly.
thing too. Like the questions are all prescriptive.
Mhm.
Like there's a question that you almost always used to get asked in interviews. They've kind of shied away from it. I haven't heard it as much, but it's still out there.
Mm.
And that's the where do you expect to be in either 5 or 10 years question.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And there's only one answer. There's only one answer that's actually the right answer. Do you know what it is?
I don't know.
See, and that's the problem. Like people don't know, and they don't know that this is an actual trick question. Because what happens is people fall into the trap to say, well, in 10 years, I want to be going and doing this. And it's a different job with a different company.
Mhm.
And that is not the way to answer that question. What they want to
Yeah,
hear
that
is
I
in
knew.
5 years or 10 years, you want to be successful in your role currently that you're applying for, and you want to have longevity with that company. It's a longevity question.
Oh,
It's
that
do
be
you
okay.
see yourself staying with this company and growing with this company, or am I hiring you to go work someplace else? And
That's
that is what that question is for.
so it's funny. I did act. It wasn't exactly worded like that, but it was that kind of a thing just a few days ago where my last, the last person I spoke with was like, "So, tell me, what do you want to do? What do you want to do?" And again,
Yeah.
it wasn't in a time
Yeah.
frame. What do you want to do? And I told him, I want to really get. First of all, let's not get ahead of myself. I want this role. That's
Yep.
number one. That's period number one. Two, I want to see myself advance and make the company better, make myself better, and
Hmm.
move upwards to maybe a people manager role and a director and so on and so forth. Like I want to stay
Right.
where I am, but advance upward, right? And that's the big thing where see, I did know the answer to that. I just didn't think I knew the answer to that, which was funny.
The,
But
the trick is in 5 years, you want to be promoted out of the job that you're applying
correct,
for. And in 10 years, you want to have established your career there to where you're leading whatever it is that you're applying for. Like that's
right,
what they're looking for. What's the longevity? Do you see yourself as a longevity person in my company, or do you see yourself as like somebody who's just using this to go get another job?
right.
That's the trick of that question. Like, but it used to always be asked, and it's always the last question.
Right. And I think you hit the nail on the head earlier in the episode when people back in, I would say from back in the day, meaning like 20s up until probably the mid 90s,
Yeah,
2000s, people
sure.
didn't jump job to job. You
Nope.
found a job and you worked there. You worked there
You're
until you were
right. Because
retiring.
The American dream says that you work hard
Hmm.
and you get rewarded for working hard.
Yep.
And it wasn't really until probably the late 90s into the 2000s that people
Hmm.
started going, well, I'm working really hard
I'm
and
not
I'm
going
not
anywhere.
really getting anywhere.
Right.
So that, happens. Now, I will ask you this question too, because this has come up recently for me in some of the process I'm doing
Hmm.
interviewing. Have you ever lied on your resume?
No, I am not gutsy enough to do that
I'm not
ever.
either. I'm
No, no,
so
no, no,
scared of
no.
that. Like it's
I
unbelievable.
don't. The only reason I do that is because I know somebody who didn't lie on their resume.
Yeah.
It was such a stupid technicality that the title of the role they had was brand advocate, and they put sales associate, and they literally
Wow.
failed their background check, and they currently work for the company, and they
Yeah.
got fired. They not only didn't get the promote, they were let go of the company entirely for
Yeah.
something like that, where there's clearly no brand advocate, sales associate. It's the same freaking thing. You're not making it seem like you're a supervisor or like what that was. But yeah, that is something that scared me into. I called previous jobs.
Yeah.
Hi, give me my exact days of hire and
Oh yeah.
termination,
Yep.
as well as exact spelling of the what you have me listed as, senior loss prevention agent, senior LP agent. Are there initials? Are there full? I
Right.
did that when I applied for the job I'm currently in because I saw that and I'm like, nope, my mama didn't raise no fool. I am getting that down to the friggin' T.
Yeah. I tell this story all the time that currently where we're employed at, that when they did my background check, uh, they asked for my high school diploma and told me I had 2 days to present it because they couldn't get in touch with my high school. And I was like, well, it's July and it's closed.
Right.
But I had to send them a copy of my high school diploma, which I had to get from my mom and have her send it to me so that I could copy it for them. I'm telling you,
It,
like it was thorough. I was like, holy cow. So yeah, I'm
it,
I'm afraid of that. But people
well,
do.
it's
Unfortunately,
funny.
people do.
It's super funny because I just realized my high school closed.
Yeah.
So you'll never be able to get in contact. I have it.
Nope.
I actually had my mother send it to me because of
Yeah.
that. I'm like, never again. Even though, I'm finishing up a bachelor's in project management, I still, you never know. You
Nope.
never know.
Never know. But Yeah, so it's called misrepresentation, and it is the one of the number one reasons people don't get hired is because they misrepresent themselves. So please don't do that.
Yes, please don't do that. Be honest. Be
Yep.
you for yourself, because that's what they're looking for.
My favorite part is that when a role doesn't need something and you still say you have it, even though you don't need it, like, why would you do that? Like, I don't understand.
It just doesn't make any sense.
All right. What's the
No.
worst interview you've ever been on?
Two come to mind. Google, the one I just told you the story of, for
You mean
sure.
Schmoogle?
Oh, I'm sorry, Schmoogle. I apologize. Legal,
That was so
legally.
much. I don't know what you're talking about. I've
Yeah, I
never
don't know
heard of
what
that
you're
other
talking.
thing.
I don't know that other
Schmoog?
thing, but
I know that.
Schmoogle,
Yes.
Schmoogle from Schmalphabet and makes the Schmixel 6. Yeah, Schmoogle, and
We're
then
getting sued.
probably they could have all $3.89 or whatever it is now. We were gonna split it and buy a stick of gum each, but that's fine.
I was gonna
And then,
give it to celebrities to come on our show, and that still hasn't happened either. So,
well,
you know,
and then my second one was for the current role I have.
Ed Helms, if he wants my $3.89, if he wants at least my portion of it, he can have it.
Right, you can have
Can't
mine
speak for
too.
your, but you know,
You can talk about not interviewing. What do they call it in Hollywood when you auditioning? He can talk about
auditioning,
his worst auditions or his
casting
best
couch.
audition. Casting couch. Oh god. No, but my second worst is in my current role. Like, I am still surprised I have the job I have, because the hiring manager. I Here's the other thing I will say.
Yeah.
If the hiring manager or the people you interview with are conversational, kind, nice, friendly,
Yep.
it makes it so much easier. It's the people who are just like, give me an answer. Tell me about this. Okay. Tell me about, like, it's like, why are you the way that you are? Why is
Yeah.
that? Like, people
Yeah.
already are like pooping themselves. Like, just loosen up a little bit. Anyways, hiring manager did a great job. I talked with a few folks, I think it went well. And then I had to talk to the hiring manager's manager.
Yeah.
And that he was one of those people who is just, so tell me about a time. Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me this. Okay. Tell me that. Okay. Tell me this. Okay. That here's the part at the end that really made it awful. So I already was like, this isn't going great. At the very end, I knew a person, I actually worked with a person who knew this person, the hiring manager's manager. So I'm
Okay.
like, hey, I'll call him Jim Smith and be like,
Right.
I know
Right.
Jim Smith. I just yelled it at them. I was so nervous. I just said, I know Jim Smith. And then the response the person gave me was, great, thanks, bye. And then hung up the phone. That
Oh
was it.
wow.
So I exited that thinking, Joe, let's look for something else, because this clearly ain't gonna happen.
Right. Right.
And then literally 4 days later, they're like, hey, we wanted to offer you the job. And I was like, really? That is surprising.
Wow.
Okay, let's do
Okay.
this. Fine. What about you?
I,
What is number one? Just ugh.
so I
Oh,
went
well, this is
on
gonna
a
be good.
job interview to be a district manager for a very well-known national tax preparation company.
Okay.
And I knew nothing about what they did. I was just desperately looking for a job.
Mhm.
And when I rolled in, and the first thing the gentleman interviewing me said was, I see you have absolutely no experience.
Great start.
It's
Absolutely great start.
like, I'm not sure why you invited me to be here
Yeah,
at this point,
right.
right? Like,
Yeah.
okay. And two questions in, I knew it was not going to happen. And then the performer in me just kicked in and decided I was just going to start making stuff up.
Yes.
And
Why
I
not?
mean, you
That's no
know,
harm.
I pulled out TPS reports from Office Space and was talking about filing their TPS reports. And
Oh, that's
I mean,
great.
just every cliche of office work I could think of,
Sure.
I was working them into everything,
I
and
I wanted your worst, not your best. This sounds like the best interview ever.
no, no, it's horrible. It was so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like, it was so bad. I
That's
was
great.
uncomfortable, and I walked out going, "What?
Woof. Woof.
Why? Why did they even like? Were they filling a quota? They had to interview
Right. Did
like,
they have to?
X amount of people before they hired somebody who actually could do the job." And yeah, they never called me back.
It's a shame, but hey,
Look
we
what they
move on.
lost out on.
Exactly.
It's the Dino and Joe Show.